of which there are 8 stages. The avoidant wants someone to love them. They found someone. Their troubles are over. They notice some worrying things in the relationship. They self-sabotage. They begin to think about leaving. They actually leave the relationship. They're so happy they left. They start to feel kind of lonely. Why can't I ever find the right person? I want someone to love me. Boom, boom, boom. Around and around we go. If you aren't familiar with this is essentially the entire life cycle of a relationship from an avoidance perspective. But I thought it would be kind of fun to color code the actual avoidant death wheel and just show you how much it overlaps with the narcissistic chart. So if you actually, I'm going to throw it up on the screen right now. If you actually look, and this is really fun to do. If you actually look at the Sir Thrive Tribe graphic where they're talking about the narcissistic abuse cycle, you'll notice they've color-coded each of the 4 stages of narcissistic abuse: the idealized stage, the devalue stage, the discard stage, and the Hoover stage. The idealized stage is kind of like this weird pale pink color. Then devalues like sort of the pink color. But I think for right now, we're just going to talk about the stages: idealize, devalue, discard, Hoover. And what I've done is I'm actually going to throw it up on the screen. I've color-coded the avoidant death wheel to show you which of the 4 stages it falls into the narcissistic sort of abuse cycle. So the stages 1 and 2 of our avoidant death wheel fall into what's known as the idealized stage. So I want someone to love me. I found someone. My troubles are over. This is where the ex will often give you a bunch of flattery, gifts, excessive attention, appeal to your heart, weaken your defense mechanisms. That's all the idealized stage. Stages 3 and 4, the I'm noticing some worrying things or I'm thinking of leading, fall into the devalue stage. So their admiration is now ceasing. They're not necessarily going to abuse you emotionally, but in some cases we have found that they will be kind of condescending a little bit. They'll notice they're distant. That is the devalue stage. They're basically ready to break up with you, but not willing to do it just yet. And then comes stages 5 and 6 of our death wheel, which is the I've decided to actually leave the relationship and I'm so happy that I left. This is the discard stage. This is where, your usefulness to them has ceased essentially. They've found a new supply, so this is often them going on the rebound. The victim, you, is tormented and feel like you meant nothing to them. And then something kind of interesting happens. Stages 7 and 8 of our death wheel, which is the avoidant feeling kind of lonely and then feeling sorry for themselves. Why can't I ever find the right person? Well, that's stage 4 of the narcissistic abuse cycle. Narcissistic abuse cycle. Say that 5 times. That's the Hoover stage. So this is when they begin to attempt to draw you back into the relationship. This is where you start to see that nostalgia kicking in. It's an almost identical fit, right? With stages 1 and 2, the avoidant falls into the idealized stage. Stages 3 and 4, the devalue stage. Stages 5 and 6, the discard stage. Stages 7 and 8, the Hoover stage. Now, does that mean all avoidant exes are narcissists? No. But I think greater consideration needs to be employed when studying them in tandem with narcissists. It surely seems to me that a lot of avoidants are falling into narcissistic behaviors. I, of course, am just hypothesizing out loud. I've got no proof to back this up other than sort of the aforementioned chart I just threw up for you. But if you want my personal take on the question right now, as it stands, with everything I've ever learned about avoidance and all of that, I think it really revolves around what type of an avoidant you're dealing with. Now, if you aren't familiar, there are 2 types of avoidance. You have the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant. Now, actually, last week I created this really cool graph to help kind of explain the major differences between the 2 in a visual medium. I basically described it as a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you have very anxious behaviors. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have very avoidant behaviors. So what's interesting is a dismissive avoidant is going to mostly fall into the avoidant behavior categories. The fearful avoidant, on the other hand, is a little bit towards the middle where half the time they're anxious and half the time they're avoidant. So they're constantly on the spectrum going from one extreme to the next. Now, I actually think as one of our previous coaches that put it best, the biggest difference between a dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant is the fact that one has a high self-esteem and one doesn't. It's the fearful avoidant that has the low self-esteem because they have anxious qualities, and those anxious qualities can bring them down. So a dismissive avoidant thinks so highly of themselves that they convince themselves that they don't need to get close to anyone, that they're okay alone. A fearful avoidant, on the other hand, will have these bouts of fear and anxiety, which causes their self-esteem to lower. Now, we know that narcissists in general view themselves as this image of a grandiose person believing that they can do no wrong. Therefore, I actually don't think it's much of a stretch to say that the reason avoidants and narcissists often get paired together is that dismissive avoidants are the individuals who are most likely to exhibit narcissistic traits, because they need to have this insane image of themselves. They need to have this insane confidence to be alone. So what's the through line? I guess my main point with this discussion is to say that when you're trying to understand why exes are coming back when you're happy, I think it has more to do with their own self-image than you. Notice the common trends and threads with everything we've talked about. Avoidant nostalgia. This is a very personal feeling an avoidant holds deep inside. So personal they never usually vocalize it, but they have this nostalgia. They hold on to it. Then there's the Phantom X. They paint you as the Phantom X. It's the way they're viewing you. Narcissistic behavior, this grandiose self-image. The through line is simple. It all has to do with your ex's fragile ego, them potentially not being able to bear you being happy without them. It's about them, not you, which is weird. And it makes sense because we know that in the grand scheme of things, human beings are very self-interested. So if you want to answer the ultimate question, why do exes always seem to be coming back when you're happy? I think the true answer is that they cannot bear being alone without you, or you being happy without them.